She was an 11-year-old mill worker. She ended up stopping a war with her bare hands. The funeral. When Mary Slessor died in Nigeria in 1915, her neighbors did not wail. They sang. In a region where grief had always been performed as violence, where women tore their own skin and men fired guns at the sky, the people who had known her longest stood at her grave and sang a doxology. That had never happened before. Not once in the known history of that place. This is the woman who made it possible. The Mill Girl. Aberdeen Harbor, cobblestone streets, a cold Scottish morning. Mary Mitchell Slessor was born on the 2nd of December, 1848 in Aberdeen, Scotland. Her father was a cobbler. He was also an alcoholic, and the combination made childhood unpredictable in the way that only poverty can be. When Mary was still young, the family moved to Dundee, one of the great industrial cities of the Victorian era, and one of its harshest. Dundee ran on jute. Its mills were cavernous, deafening, and dangerous. At 11 years old, Mary Slessor went to work in one. A mill interior, looms moving, child-sized silhouettes, dust in the air. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, she threaded bobbins before sunrise and walked home in the dark. This is not the biography of someone born to greatness. This is the biography of someone who found it anyway. A small church, light from a window, a woman speaking to a group of children. In her neighborhood, an elderly Christian woman had made it her practice to speak to mill children about their souls. She did not wait for them to come to her. She went to them. She went to Mary. And somewhere between the shifts and the cold and the exhaustion, something took root. Mary Slessor began attending Bible classes in the evenings, then Sunday school. Then tentatively, she began to teach. A mill girl with no formal education, standing in front of children, opening a book she had come to love. A newspaper headline, David Livingstone, Africa, a map. Then news came from Africa. David Livingstone, the great Scottish missionary and explorer, had died in 1873, kneeling in prayer in a hut in Zambia. His body was carried over 1,000 miles of bush by his African companions, who refused to leave him and shipped home to Scotland. His death became a call. Mary heard it. August 5th, 1876, Mary Slessor, age 28, sails for Africa. She left behind her wages. She left behind her family. She did not leave behind her Bible. A tropical coastline, dense forest, a river, humid air. Birds, insects, the sound of oars on water. Calabar, in what is now southern Nigeria, was considered by missionaries to be among the most spiritually and physically dangerous places on the continent. The European slave trade had officially ended, but it had left devastation in its wake. Intertribal warfare was constant, and witchcraft governed daily life. Alcohol, gin and rum imported by traders, was drunk by every adult and by children from infancy. And there was one practice that stopped even hardened missionaries in their tracks. Forest undergrowth, a path through darkness. The music grows still. Twins. In Calabar, the birth of twins was considered a catastrophe. The belief was absolute. One of the twins had been fathered by an evil spirit, but no one knew which one, and so both had to be destroyed. The infants' backs were broken. They were thrown into the bush, left for insects and animals. The mother, considered contaminated by the birth, was driven from her village, shamed, banished, abandoned to the forest. A forest edge, the sound of something distant and inconsolable. A single heartbeat. Mary arrived in Calabar and began her work teaching school, tending the sick and learning the Efik language until she dreamed in it. And when she heard about the twins, she did not look away. She went into the bush. She was not fearless. She was afraid every time. She went anyway. She brought 2 infants back. She brought the mothers back. At any given time throughout her ministry, her home was full of rescued children. She tied strings from her bed to their hammocks so she could rock them through the night without getting up. The people of Calabar watched this and waited for her to die. They assumed the curse would take her. It did not. Something stubborn, quiet, surviving. Gradually, she became known as Mary Slessor, the white ma who loves babies. Dense jungle, a narrow path, a woman walking, a small against the trees. Forest, quiet, something watching. In 1888, after 12 years in Calabar, Mary made a decision that alarmed everyone who knew her. She wanted to go deeper. The Okoyong people lived in a forested wedge of land between the Cross and Calabar rivers, a region no missionary had successfully penetrated. The Okoyong were feared by neighboring tribes, by traders, by British officials. The church sent her with a small team. They all left before long. Mary stayed. A mud floor hut, rain through a roof, a lamp is burning. She lived in conditions that appalled the few Europeans who visited. Mud floors. No running water. Fever, constant, punishing, recurring. She nearly died of malaria more than once. She wore a local dress. She went barefoot. She learned to eat what the Okoyong ate and sit where the Okoyong sat. She was not performing humility. She had no patience for performance of any kind. Okoyong. No white person had stayed. Mary stayed. Something about to break through. Among the Okoyong, when a chief died, his slaves were executed, killed to accompany him into the spirit world. When the first chief died after Mary arrived, she intervened. She argued. She refused to leave. She sat with the body and kept talking until the killing stopped. It was the first time in the known history of Okoyong that a chief was buried without a single life taken to accompany him. The elders came to her privately one by one to thank her. They did not want the killings either. They had simply never had someone willing to stand in the way. What she actually looked like. Because the woman doing all of this was 5 feet tall. She was red-haired and pale-skinned in a tropical climate. She had spent her childhood in a factory, not a finishing school. She had no military escort. No bodyguards. No official authority. Lay 5 feet, barefoot, alone. She later wrote that she was afraid almost constantly. I am not naturally brave, she said. I am afraid. But I have learned that fear and obedience are not the same thing. On one occasion, accounts differ on the exact year, but the event is documented. 2 tribes reached the brink of open war. Armed men faced each other across a clearing. The insult that had started it barely mattered anymore. What mattered was that both sides had come ready to kill and expected to. Mary Slessor walked into the space between them. She told both sides to put their rifles down. She told them to pile the weapons on either side of her. They did. Weapons stacked, men standing still, a woman small between 2 mountains of guns. She later wrote that her heart was beating so fast she thought she might collapse. She did not collapse. She negotiated until both sides agreed to walk away. Fear and obedience are not the same thing. In 1892, the British government, recognizing that Mary Slessor had more actual authority in Okoyong than any of their officials, formally appointed her as vice consul and judge for the region. She was the first woman ever to hold such a position in the British Empire. She presided over cases wearing local dress, often barefoot, with adopted children playing around her ankles. The court was hers. The community was hers. Not by conquest, by presence. The twins. A door, night, rain. A woman holding two infants. Rain, a knock at the door. A baby is crying. Somewhere in all of this, the work that never stopped were the children. Over the course of her 38 years in Nigeria, Mary Slessor adopted more than 50 children. Twin babies abandoned in the bush, infants of slave mothers who had died. Children were left at the edge of the forest in the belief that no one was coming. Someone always came. Hands, small, dark, wrapped around a finger. By the time she died, the killing of twins had ceased, not just in Calabar, not just in Okoyong, but across the regions she had touched. Laws changed, customs shifted. What had been unthinkable became possible, because one woman had treated the unwanted as if they mattered, because she believed they did. The unwanted must be loved because they are. Not as a program, not as a project. One baby at a time in a hut in the dark, with a string tied to a hammock. A Nigerian village at dawn, a church bell, sunlight through palm trees. Mary Slessor died on the 13th of January 1915 in a small hut in Use Ikat Oku, Nigeria. She was 66 years old. She had been in Africa for 38 years. She was buried in Duketown, the place she had first arrived, a young woman from a Dundee mill, with a Bible and a conviction she could barely name. Her burial site, the Duketown Church, a congregation gathered. And then her neighbors sang, not the wailing of a community that had lost something, the doxology of a community that had been found. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. That had never happened before. Not once in the known history of that place. The mill prepared her for Africa. The Bible prepared her for everything else. History is his story. Please subscribe. He's Watch Next. Forbidden Bible, Japan, just Nicolas Zamora.